Sorry. Wow, my time zones are off. Hi, I am Xena Olsen, or Cheerio, and Jared Peck is detained. Family emergency. So y'all get to listen to me. I'm very sorry. And as a consolation prize, I got Tom over here in the corner to help us out a little bit. He'll be handing out some candy. And if you're really good, you'll get a chocolate bar and maybe some Father's Day cards. So, this talk is on attribution. And it's not a contentious talk with attribution. It's more of a, hey, like, this is really cool, and there are some useful things that you can get out of it. And here's what we did, because I am not a super rock star, like, amazing attribution person. I am just a CTI analyst that does what my company wants and tells me to do. So I'm going to show you a little bit about how I made that work for my organization without going full attribution. And I'm going to start as if I am doing like a normal workday. So imagine that you are a CTI analyst and you get in first thing in the morning. And what I usually do is I check the shared intel with the intelligence sharing groups. I won't name names. Some of them are secret squirrel. Can't say it, but let's say that one of them's like, hey, there's this really bad spearphishing campaign, like, you might want to check it out. So I decided to look within the environment for some of the IOCs that they presented, and I was like, oh my gosh, like, something bypassed our controls and actually got delivered to the end user. And I'm like, oh no, because part of it was like a spearphishing campaign that drops dark COMET, right? Which isn't necessarily the best, especially if you're a financial institution. So what I did is I went to hybrid analysis. Now, most Fortune 500 financial services institutions won't do this because they have their own on-prem thing, but for the purposes of this particular talk, I decided to make it user-friendly. So I went to hybridanalysis.com and saw that this particular link that was found in the spearphishing campaign was malicious. So since we're doing an attribution demo, it's like, okay, well, what is attribution about? Finding out who done it, right? So I'm like, okay, let's go to who is and see where the IP is from and kind of correlate that. And as you can see, it says China.cn, and the IP is from China. So, of course, it's China that was attempting to spearphish us. So as we go along, I'm like, okay, well, I'll do a URL scan IO of this and attempt to see, okay, well, what exactly did the spearphishing look like, or what were they up to? And I saw this here and I'm like, Chinese lettering. Okay, like, closer chance of it actually being, like, from China. So, playing the attribution hat, it must be China. But then, since you're a skilled CTI analyst, you're like, wait, what else do I have at my disposal, right? Threat actor reports. So, as a CTI analyst, those are so important to what we do every day. So you're looking through the threat actor reports and you're like, it kind of looked a little bit like a watering hole attack, possibly because they had Java up there and a few other things that are resources for techie type people. And I'm like, all right, so let's go. And voila, we find an anomaly threat report with water hole attacks and spearphishing. So guess what it is? It's Russian TTPs. We got spearphishing and a water hole attack. So of course, it has to be Russia, right? Russia's coming after us. It couldn't be anyone other than Russia. And who is the most famous Russian nation-state threat actor? Anyone? Fancy Bear! APT-28. So of course it's gotta be them, right? So let's go through some of their TTPs there. Do we have credential harvesting? Well, doesn't really look like it to me. There's not really too many places I could put in something, so I'm just going to say no. And another one of the APT28's favorite things to do is to have a fake email login. So let's look at this thing again. I don't see anything that's like mimicking like Hotmail or Yahoo or I don't know, any of those other ones, Microsoft. So I'm going to say no. And as a financial services institution, I'm going to say that I'm not a U.S. political organization. So that would be no. So let's think about this. Yes, we have a water hole attack. Yes, we have spear phishing, but does anything else line up with APT28? Probably not. So since we're on the Russia kick, let's try a different Russian threat actor. So what about Venomous Bear? And this is in honor of CrowdStrike, one of the sponsors of Circle CityCon. So we got spear phishing. Yes, look at that. So non-ATTRIB spoofed infrastructure. I'd say an IP from China, even though it's Russia. And the Chinese lettering, I'd say yes. So are you a government organization or a non-government organization? I'd probably say that a financial services institution is either a government or non-government organization. So I would say yes. Okay, so here's the fun one. Russian holidays. So around this time, leading up to Circle CityCon 6.0, Russia had 2 holidays. One of them was their International Labor Day, and another one was Victory Day. And amazingly, we didn't get any emails on either of those days. So no activity on Russian holidays? Yes. Russian normal business hours, is there activity? Yeah, there definitely was. So, hooray! Guess what it is? It's gotta be Russia! It's gotta be Russia, right? But then, as a CTI analyst, you're like, but wait, the intel that was shared with us, it told us about malware, dark COMET. So what the heck's going on with that? Like, we can't just say, oh, it's gotta be Russia because of this, and activity, right? So we take it one step further, and we're considering the malware. Yes, it ended up landing on the targeted user's endpoint, and it is dark COMET. So, as a really good CTI analyst, what would you do? You would reference threat actor reports. And this is FireEye. And after doing some digging, dark COMET is associated with APT38. So it has to be that, right? No one else has access to dark COMET at all, ever. And only APT38 knows how to use dark COMET. So, it's gotta be North Korea, and they are totally not a nuclear threat. Totally not. So, are you a financial institution? Yes. Are there attacks related to your web apps, like Apache Struts? So, let's say you go and look at the WAF around the time that you're getting activity for the spear phishing emails or whatever else, right? Around the time that the dark COMET landed on the end user's endpoint. And you're like, wow, there are no exploits related at all to any of my web apps, specifically that one, Apache Struts, in my WAF logs. So that would be a big fat no. And are there signs of other APT TTPs? And the answer is no. So unfortunately, all of this work and research that we did equals nothing. It's not APT38. But it could potentially still be North Korea. So let's dig a little bit further. Where else is dark COMET found? Dark COMET used to be $490. Now it's free. So we'll have a little bit talk about commodity malware. So dark COMET itself, it was made by a French security professional. And as of, oh, very nice. Hello. Nice to see you. And as of, I believe it is 2012, it's available for anyone to download for free. So, unfortunately, this would require a lot more research because not just APT-38, not just North Korea have access to it, like basically anyone can have access to it. So, kind of doesn't narrow down the scope at all. And attribution is kind of a continual process. Whenever threat actor reports are published or anything hits the news or a DOJ indictment or any of those things, like it's not like a one and done type of thing. You have to continually do research and like work on attribution itself, like who done it. But at the end of the day, it all boils down to human operators. So, hi, I am Xena Olsen. I work for a financial services Fortune 500 company. I am a cyber threat intelligence analyst. I have a bunch of certifications, and I really enjoy my job, and my coworkers are cool, and my boss is great. All of my bosses. And I am not speaking on behalf of my employers. Not at all. I have 2 of them, at least, right now. So, not speaking on behalf of them. And, like I said, brief disclosure, I am not an attribution professional, so this is mainly for illustrative purposes and kind of the logic and reasoning behind what it is that we do and why we do it. Because attribution is freaking hard. So it's not something that you just wake up and you're like, oh, I think I'll just do attribution today. Like, it takes a lot of education, a lot of tools, a lot of schooling, not easy. So this is what we're going to start with. Basic roadmap of the talk. Attribution is hard. It's very hard. Very, very hard. Why we love it. Traditional intelligence. Some benefits of attribution. Of course, the F-Bang attribution, and that's in honor of Bang Bang Con in San Francisco. And then leveraging TTPs, and finally some lessons learned. So we'll start out on Venus, since we already did the demo. There is no right way to do attribution, so I don't know if you follow the Twitters, but there's like Fuzzy Snuggly Duck, right? And then there's like, you know, the Chronicle people, and then all these like people, and they're all like fighting about the right way to do attribution and this and that. And I say, do whatever your company wants because they're paying your paycheck. So, at the end of the day, that's what it boils down to. If they're not happy with what you do, like you're out of a job. So what is attribution? And I'm going to do a fancy quote here. Attribution is ascertaining responsibility for malicious cyber activity. And this was by the Hoover Institution on War, Revolution, and Peace in an American public policy think tank and research institution located at Stanford University in California. So I have a lot of tools up there because, believe it or not, like, you have to actually know a lot of stuff, like, from reversing to network analysis to how to interpret misinformation to alternative hypothesis to questioning how you think to so many different tools, not only with your brain and skills that you learn, but also with actual, like, tools that you pay money for. So, the other thing is staffing. So, for instance, at my current organization, there are 2 CTI analysts. And with 2 CTI analysts, like, I almost speak English okay. Almost. Like, you need to know Chinese, you need to know Russian, you need to know Korean, you need to know all these other languages. And, for instance, like FireEye, right? They have like a whole slew of people to help with attribution and putting things in the quote-unquote right buckets whenever they deal with incidents. Like, there's only 2 of us that are focused on this, so we have to allocate our time and our resources wisely in order to increase the defensive posture of our organization. And then also 2 priorities. So if your company says, hey, I want you to work with the SOC, you work with the SOC. You don't argue with them. You know, like you can't just be like, yeah, no, I think I'm just gonna sit here and try to figure out the Russia thing. Like, it doesn't work that way. Like, you do what the company needs at the time that it needs it. And then, of course, management. You need to have your management on board with whatever the CTI analysts are doing. Otherwise, you'll get labeled as a rogue analyst, which is bad. Okay, so here's a little talk about all the stuff that usually goes into what people consider when they do attribution. So it's the compiler used, compile time, libraries, language keyboard layout, programming language, metadata, resource language, time zone information, build times, C2 check-in times, mutex names, kernel pool tags, passwords, indicators, domain registration, IP ownership, code styles, PDNS, passive DNS, SSL certs, and more. So that's a lot, especially if you're tracking that through like the whole internet as far as potential attacks that are coming against you. And then a little known fact, well, I thought it was interesting when I was doing research. There's actually a difference between NATO countries and non-NATO countries and how they handle attribution. So, for instance, NATO has affirmed that international law applies in cyberspace. So, some allies, like Denmark, Estonia, Lithuania, the Netherlands, wow, I can talk, the United Kingdom and the United States have sought to use public attribution of malicious cyber activity to change behavior. So I thought that that was interesting. And then also too, another thing that makes attribution hard is the naming structure. So you have all of these vendors and they call similar TTPs or similar activities the same thing. So for instance, like Fancy Bear, right? It's APT28. It's also known as Sophacy. It's also known as, and I'm not going to pronounce this right, Sednet. I mean, one threat actor has so many different names, so it gets kind of confusing. And then also too, within the organization, what's generally approved or standard is that you come up with your own threat actor names. So not only do you have all of the different threat vendor actor names that you have to work with and track, you also have your own threat actor that you make up the name for, like Orange Sunrise or something like that. So, if you haven't heard, there are a lot of job openings in cybersecurity, so that also impacts cyber threat intel. So you need these highly specialized analysts to be able to know all this stuff and be trustworthy and so many different things, but yet we have a skills gap and shortage in cybersecurity, so that of course impacts cyber threat intelligence industry. And really, attribution is a tradecraft. It's not something that you just wake up knowing how to do. And what I mean by tradecraft is that you have to know about cultures, you have to know about politics, you have to know about regional customs. It would be helpful to know about international trade agreements, current events around the world, and probably more. Like I said, I'm not a professional at attribution, so I'm only guessing their list is ridiculously long. And the other thing is that attackers, at least in our modern internet infrastructure, they can cover their tracks fairly decently. So how would you, or how would I, decipher between someone that's a U.S. citizen using Russian malware and a Russian using Russian malware? Like, that seems like that would be kind of hard to do. I know I couldn't do it, so. And then actors are increasingly relying on living off the land, and of course commodity malware like dark COMET to do what they do. And then the actors too, so like for instance with the Mirai bots and other things like that, they compromise other people's, not their own, infrastructure, and they use that for attacks. So it's like they hide within a network and then they attack from there. Oh, thank you. I got a truffle. And so the other thing is, this is really interesting. So Tim MALWARE came out with a book. It's called Cyber Mercenaries, The State, Hackers, and Power. And basically he discusses the use of independent hackers to act as a proxy for nation-state actors. So myself, I wouldn't be able to tell the difference between someone acting as a proxy for nation-state actors or them just being a lone hacker. So it's stuff like that that makes attribution kind of difficult. And who can forget Olympic destroyer with the false flags? So originally I believe they thought it was North Korea, or Lazarus as they're all grouped into that. And then I think it was Russia. And then there are some things that look like Chinese APTs, and I believe the final verdict is that they still are not 1,000,000% sure, but I'm sure someone on the Twitterverse is gonna tell me about it, so I look forward to hearing about it. So why do we love attribution? If you don't know already, in the news, they talk about hackers, and they paint these like wonderfully lavish stories. So for instance, the NPR recently came out with an article. It's called "As China Hacked, US Turned a Blind Eye." And so basically China contributed or was a part of $57 billion per year in losses due to possibly like reputation damage and stolen intellectual property. And then another one that was recent was hacking keeps us up at night. And it was in the Washington Post. And guess what it was about? It was about Chinese hackers, of course. And China's trying to manipulate the system to its ultimate long-term advantage. So imagine non-cybersecurity professionals reading this and they're like, it's China, it's China. That's why people say it's China. Oh, look, another story, the New York Times on Chinese spies and how they're using the shadow brokers' tools for hacking. So another reason why we like it is that attribution is kind of like storytelling. So, I had a little bit of training in neuroception, the polyvagal theory, and biochemistry. And I'm going to boil down a lot of really complicated years of study. So please forgive me for the oversimplification. But basically, so with cortisol, I can start building the tension, like, oh my gosh, you get in the morning and you look at the secret squirrel intelligence that you get about what's going on in your industry. And then with dopamine, it encourages further engagement, like storytelling, like, okay, well, I went here and it wasn't that, and on and on. And then finally, oxytocin creates an emotional connection with the story. So another thing that makes attribution memorable is the archetypes. So it's kind of like the hero's journey, where you know, you take any of the stories in the news or even within your own organization, and I could be the heroine and I'm kind of trying to hunt down the bad guys, and I go into my descent into darkness because I can't find any information anywhere on like these particular TTPs, and I can't tell the difference between this and that and this IP and this particular malware, you know, like where the heck did they get it from, and I'm not finding it, and VirusTotal, and just on, and then finally like the release of the tension. So that's like, that just kind of really talks to the human collective unconscious as far as archetypes and how our subconscious mind processes information. So for instance, at the very beginning, when I was sharing the story, if I just said like really quick, like, yo, it was a spearphishing campaign that dropped Dark Comet, you'd be like, all right, and so instead I tried to illustrate like all the different steps that some people take in order to get to the bottom of attribution itself. So that's why it's sexy. Attribution is sexy, for lack of a better word. And another thing is traditional intelligence. So if you've ever done a job requisition for cyber threat intelligence analysts, I probably say the vast majority of resumes that you're going to get, just saying, are from the military. So they have they have a lot of really good training on intelligence and how to do that analysis and how to think like a intelligence analyst. So another thing is, do you remember the Hamas thing that got bombed recently because of, so you have to, so that also comes into traditional intelligence where like, they're like, yo, you know, these hackers are attacking this country and they're at this particular location and, you know, we got bombs, why don't we bomb them? Okay. And magically the attack stopped. So what are some benefits to attribution? So I am going to go out on a limb here and say that true attribution should be professionals only. Like, I know I would totally suck at it, so I'm not even going to try. Robert M. Lee, the author of SANS Forensics 578, the Cyber Threat Intelligence course for SANS, he states on his blog that, quote, most tactical folks shouldn't consider true attribution. And that it's highly, highly abused and resource intensive with little value in the wider community today. End of quote. So, Robert M. Lee is kind of like my CTI god. Like, I think he's super awesome and amazing, and I like take in everything he says and I like think about it for days. I'm like, wow, that was so deep. So I kind of, go with what he says because he's awesome and he knows what he's talking about and he's smart. So another benefit to attribution is strategic threat intelligence. So, for instance, let's say you have no idea what's going on in your environment, but like, they're like, yo, look at threat actors and how they relate to your environment. And you're like, well, we don't really do host-based forensics, so what do, right? We look at some of the top threat actors that are known to be attacking like financial institutions or whatever organization you have, and you kind of go that route with it for like long-term recommendations of like, well, they like to go after Apache struts, so if we have that vulnerable in our environment, we should like patch that. So things like that. I mean, it's really simple, but it kind of boils down to that. Like, hey, they like to attack this, or like CVE 2017-11882, right? Let's say that they're sending, documents with that particular vulnerability to exploit in it. Well, then, if you have that not patched in your environment, you'd be like, hey, operations team, I think we should patch this because we're being actively attacked with this. So that's helpful. And then a private versus government versus critical infrastructure. So as a private organization, I mean, yeah, it's nice to know who's attacking me, I guess. But it seems like it would be more important for, like, the government with USA election tampering. Like, gee, who's trying to F with democracy, right? Like, that would be nice to know. 'Cause then, yeah, we could, do something about that. And then critical infrastructure, of course, like, if Iran's like, we're gonna blow up all your trains and, like, your electricity and stuff, like, that would be bad. So we'd probably want to do something about that, too. So basically, attribution is great. Some parts of it, not so great. Very resource intensive. So basically what you want to do is take what's useful and then throw out the rest, kind of like trash. Another thing to consider is, does your company legally pursue hackers, or do they go after fraudsters? Because there's a difference there. So think about that. Like, if they don't pursue hackers, why would you spend, like, all of your time, like, researching where the hacker lives, right? Doesn't make sense too much. Like, you'd probably want to, I don't know, find a new shiny next-gen thing to put into your environment, or, I don't know, make sure that any gaps in your detection or mitigation strategies are fixed. So, and how attribution hurts. So, for instance, let's say that I was like, hey, employer, Russia is coming after us, and this particular actor with these particular TTPs, and they're like, cool, like, we'll spend like $1 million extra. I'm just throwing this out there. I know that they probably wouldn't, to like protect against those particular, exploits and attacks. But then I didn't like do something right with the attribution or whatever, and it really turned out to be a different, threat actor. So we just like, I don't know, kind of pissed away $1 million. So it's like, it can be hurtful as far as where you spend your resources and your time and where you have people within your organization focus their energy. And another problem is that sometimes this is bad, like, don't hack back. Like, I don't recommend it. Some people think it's great. I think it's not a good idea. Because you never really know what exactly you're hacking back at. Is it a nation state actor? Is it just someone acting as a proxy? Is it stolen infrastructure? Like, what's going on with that? So it could be an innocent person, or it could be the actual attacker. You don't know, like, which one is which. And finally, your CISO. I do my best. I'm definitely not at that level, but I try to understand where they're coming from and the responsibility that they have that rests on their shoulders and kind of what keeps them up at night. And so I'm like, if I had the same responsibility, would I want to go to my board and talk about, I'm going to quote Kevin Mandia here, fluffy snuggle duck, or Robert M. Lee, fuzzy squirrel, and talk about those particular threat actors that were named within your organization? Or would I want to present reports and charts and graphs of all of the different security posture of the organization and how well it's protected from various threat actors, or vectors, excuse me? I would prefer to go with more of a concrete thing. So definitely feeling or understanding where your higher leadership is coming from and what they want or don't want or what their concern is. Like sometimes, like back in the day when I did some fancy stuff with lots of money, the people, my clients, they just cared about how good it looked. They didn't really care necessarily about like the actual mechanics or like how stuff got done. They just cared if they had a fancy like full page ad and like I don't know, the Wall Street Journal or whatever. Like they didn't really give a shit about anything else. So you have to find out like what the type of temperament and what type of focus your leadership has, like, so knowing that they just care about having a full page ad in the Wall Street Journal, or they just care about having a name to be like, oh, it's fluffy snuggle duck, or it's fuzzy squirrel. Like, if they just care about that and not necessarily about mapping out like what exactly is going on in their organization and really coming to terms with the technical debt and all of that, then like, you know what to do. So I'm going to talk a little bit about leveraging TTPs. And actually, I think it was on May 31st, a Ross Wolf, he did a really amazing talk on TTPs. It was called the Hunter Games, and it was actually here. So if you get a chance, like, check it out on the YouTubes. Like, I can't add any more to that. He did a freaking amazeballs job, so check that out. But basically, that attribution is hard, and it's not necessarily productive for most organizations. So you can collect tools, techniques, and procedures that adversaries use, then use them against your own organization to strengthen defenses. So here's a little bit. So that's me on the left in a ponytail. We have 2 CTI analysts. So what do you do with our time? We're kind of like I'm not a football person, but I tried to find something that would relate to the audience, like the Hail Mary pass. So like basically if we don't catch it, like it doesn't get caught until it's bad, basically. So we do, instead of doing true attribution, we do something called pre-incident triage. So we review intel shared by other financial institutions and also our secret squirrel groups. And we review vendor threat actor reports, also the OSINT, open source threat actor reports, like anything we can get our hands on, DOJ indictments, pretty much anything. Lots of reading. I also, almost every day, I review the defer tickets to look for trends, patterns, and then also to make recommendations, because I kind of look at it this way. So our SOC and defer, they're in the weeds. They're just like pounding through the tickets and getting through the stuff and keeping us afloat, basically. They do an awesome, phenomenal job. I love them so much. They work so hard. So what I do is I review it at kind of a higher level. And I see, I'm like, that's not good. Like, there's a sextortion email, there's a sextortion email. Like, how is this bypassing our controls? So then what I do is I kind of dig a little bit deeper, and then I make recommendations to the powers that be regarding what they want to do or not do. And then SOC. So if the SOC has concerns, or if they bring something up in one of our meetings, I'll be like, oh, that sucks. Okay, so I'll do a little bit of extra research and see if I can add additional context or provide like extra tools or other ideas, or possibly reach out to vendors or do an RFI for someone, like anything to help out with their workload and what they're doing. Another thing I do is so some of our vendors, they keep data as far as attacks that are coming at our organization. So what I do is I make fancy reports out of that, and I track that over time. And then another thing is I look at security controls in place, and I ensure that there are signatures for new attacks. And then also to third-party compromise, is there a business impact? So I know recently there was like almost every other day, like I was sending out like a, hey, one of our vendors was compromised, just FYI. So sometimes it's a lot and it's like doing constant updates and stuff. Other times it's kind of a lull, which is for research and report writing and all of that. Another thing is internal RFIs. So other teams and departments, they don't have access to the same tools and vendors that I do. So then they ask us as cyber threat intel, like, yo, what's going on with this? Like, we need to make decisions. So then what I do is I do a ton of research, or I do RFIs, and then I create a report and submit that to my internal teams so that they can do what they want to do with it. I don't tell them what to do with it. I just say, hey, this is bad, or this has a low threat rating, or medium, or high, or critical. And then another thing is, so for instance, like Recorded Future, they have like threat actor reports, and they have intelligence reports by a group that works specifically for Recorded Future, I believe. I don't know. I can never say their name. Inksit? Anyone in the audience? Nope. All right. So Recorded Future has an intel team, and they produce intelligence. So I'll look over that and I'll be like, okay, like they seem to think that this is important, and they have access to a lot more clients than I do. So perhaps I should look at that within my own environment and see if I can make any recommendations or updates or anything like that. So I do that as well. And then if there are any proof of concepts, exploits in the wild, especially with remote code execution, like that's a big one, I will sound the alarms and like scream at the top of my lungs, not literally, like, hey, this is really bad. We should probably do something about this. I'd like to keep my job, thank you. And then, of course, emerging threats. So I kind of look at my position as more of a customer-centric type of role. I'm kind of there to do what they need and help them fill in the gaps and to provide additional context. So my particular customers are, of course, enterprise, business-wide, definitely the SOC, DFIR, Hunt, Red Team, basically anyone that my organization pays, like, they're my customer. And then another thing that we started doing is daily threat reports that relate directly to our organization. So that way, like, when the managers and directors get in the morning, they're like, oh, okay, this is what they're thinking about. This is what they care about or not care about. So this has helped teams within our organization, and they're happy to get this information because, honestly, like, I think at some organizations, definitely at mine, like, CTI is kind of like a secret thing. It's like, ooh, like, what do they do? You know, what are these people up to? So I'm gonna loop it back to the beginning again with the attribution demo and kind of share with you how I would walk through the same steps of, hey, these FIs are all saying, like, the spearphishing campaign that's dropping Dark Comet is really bad, and I have that intel. Me doing a non-attribution standpoint or non-true attribution, like, what would I do? So what I would do is I would make sure that the domain is blocked at the proxy. I would enter the domain in our tip for detection. I would submit a ticket to our SOC for deep network analysis because they are freaking amazing. And then I would submit a ticket to DFIR to recommend blocking the sender due to the campaign. And then I would escalate it to DFIR regarding the malware once I found that on the box. And then since it's a campaign over time, I would double check that there's no actual vendor relationship with the sender of that particular email. I would also attempt to obtain a sample of the malware from the hash to determine if there's hard-coded C2, URL, any type of information that I could get out of it to help with detection or YARA rules or anything. Another thing is I would review threat reports and monitor intel sharing groups for any additional information or insight or anything, basically anything. And then I would review detection and mitigation strategies for malware, spear phishing, and determine where the security controls failed. Because if we got malware on a box, like, obviously something isn't working right because it got through our email. And then, I would make requests to vendors or the in-house team for blocking mitigation or detection strategies, like whatever I came up with. And then I would determine if the recipient of the particular email was a high-value target or HVT. And if so, I would create a report specific to high-value targets, clicking phishing links, and I would submit that to our internal phishing team. And then they would do with it what they want, whether they would enrich the phishing program that they have or, like, have a talk with them. I'm not sure. One of the two, depends how high value target they are. And then I would determine how many users clicked and if it would be a good report to generate for the internal phishing team to use in their campaigns. So for instance, if you noticed over like a 6-month period of time, people within your organization tend to click on phishing links that are related to like Office 365 or OneDrive, like I would get that information, or health and wellness, that's actually another big one. I would get that information to my phishing team and be like, hey, if you want them to click on something, like just send them a health and wellness phishing campaign and you'll see like the numbers for reals instead of what they send. Our phishing campaign is awesome, by the way. I'm not saying that it's not. Just saying that we can add additional enrichment by what's actually going on in our environment and what users are doing. And then I would consolidate the CTI data over time and create graphs and reports for my manager to present to upper leadership. So that's a lot. That's a lot for just that one campaign, but that's what I do every day, basically. And then, of course, like threat hunting. So threat hunting, you can look for adversaries already in your systems, and this is where the TTPs of known threat actor groups come in handy. And watched that talk the other day, because he did an amazing job. I forgot his name, but adversary simulation. So For instance, if you're doing a red team simulation, you would pretend that you're APT-28, and you would attack using their known TTPs, and kind of testing the mitigation and detection strategies that are in place, and you would kind of like, there's a little bit of purple teaming and create a report around like what they could get through, what they couldn't get through, what worked, what didn't work, what failed, and then kind of improve your defensive strategy from that. So I'm going to do a really quick lessons learned. Basically, it's a good idea to close the loop. So SOC, CTI, defer, red team, hunt, like all of that, like not being siloed. I think there's someone else here at Circle City Con, because I was watching it on the YouTubes, and he was saying how like siloing your different teams is bad, like closing the loop and having good communication is important. And yeah, communicate before the actual incidents. And so when WannaCry came out, Jared, my would-be presenter, he actually got a copy of it and had to reverse engineer it to find like I think it was, they ended up blacklisting something, or sinkhole, there we go. He had to find the domain that was hard-coded to sinkhole it. So CTI analysts kind of come in for a little bit of the heavy lifting as well. And then shadow brokers. So when they dump the 0-day, oh my gosh, it's Ed Scotus. I love you. Sorry. Okay. Right. Focus. So when shadow brokers dump the NSA tools, we followed along with intel sharing and looked for TTPs and how we could defend against that. We even went to ThoughtCon. I think it was not this year, but the year before, there was a talk on like how people, oh, thank you. I got a fortune cookie too. How people were leveraging the tools with shadow broker in ways to do detection for it. So we specifically went there because the talks weren't recorded, just to listen to that. So okay, so I have a little bit of a fun game. We can do it really quick. Whoever participates the most gets either chocolate, Father's Day cards, or mints, okay? So, from what I said at this talk, H blank behind the keyboard. Anyone shout it out, shout it out. Humans! Human operators. No, you guys are close. Okay. So, attribution is... Yay! Okay. Threat blank reports are gold. Actor, yes, good job. Blank sharing is intel. Yes, you got it right. Intel sharing is vital. And then leave blank attribution to the pros. True. Leave true attribution to the pros because they're good at it. And then attribution is a... Yes, you guys got it right. So there's that. And thank you very much. Here's my Twitters. And then Jared's as well, and I have a website. And then here's some resources. So on your own, if you want to play with it and kind of like, I mean, I honestly found the URL for this particular demo on hybrid analysis. I just looked for like nasty, icky, bad stuff from China, and that's how this whole talk kind of happened. And then Pulse Dive is really awesome. So what they do, they have a scoring algorithm, and I'm not getting paid for this, by the way. Like, I'm not getting a kickback. But they have a really cool scoring algorithm. So let's say, like, I have to produce X amount of reports a day, and I'm like, crap, I don't have a report left today. So what I'll do is go to Pulse Dive, and then I'll look at the critical things that are listed as critical within the last 24 hours, and then I'll search, like, popular malware that's sent our way, even if it's blocked, and then I'll search within our environment, and then I'll make a report out of that. So Pulse Dive is my, like, easy win, like, when I have, like, reports due, and I'm like, oh no, I spent most of the day, like, trying to figure out what this technical thing was saying. I have to do something. So, and then URL scan.io, I make sure that whenever I do this particular thing, I don't do a public scan, I do a private one. And it also gives me, you know, the little, the image of the website that I had. It came from urlscan.io. And then, of course, attack.miter.org. So the one that I'm currently working on right now that I'm going to send over to Hunt is the PNG files, and kind of looking for persistence within our environment for that, and creating a report and then submitting it to Hunt and Red Team to kind of run down. So I kind of use MITRE ATT&CK for ideas as far as things to look for within our environment. So it's a good resource for CTI analysts. And there's a lot of resources that I used for this. That's it. Thank you so much, you guys. You could have been doing so many other things, and I appreciate your time and your attention, and I hope you like the candy and the mini bribes that I gave you. So, thank you. Oh, questions? Oh, I guess we don't have time, but if you have questions, I'm here. No?